Hey guys, what's up? It's your boy T for 365 Horror, and this is a horror movie discovery channel. I am just here to put as many horror movies on your watch list as possible. And in today's video, we are going to be looking at 5 brand new releases for you guys to watch and stream today. So let's get into it right now. Now we are going to get into the video, but before we do, I've got to remind you guys to please like and subscribe if you like this content. Also, this video is best watched with a movie tracker. I like to use Letterboxd. It's just the easiest way to keep track of the movies that you've seen and want to see. I also wanted to touch on the availability of these titles, as I have personally verified that each one of these movies is released and available. If you are having trouble seeing them, there is probably one of 2 reasons. One, you might be region locked. Now, a lot of these movies tend to release in the USA first, and they don't really release in Canada for a little bit. And the number 2 reason you might be having some trouble seeing these movies is if you are using alternative media sites or any of the free stuff. A lot of these movies just released yesterday, and so they don't really show up on those sites for a couple days. And another thing I wanted to touch on is this is just a preview. These are not reviews and recommendations. As always, I've included timestamps and chapters in the description, so if you don't like any of the trailer reactions or any of the movies I've picked, you can always skip to the next one. And if you did want some reviews and recommendations, then I suggest you watch my Every Movie I Watched in a Month series, my You Should Watch series, or any of my movie list series. This here is just a little something for the diehards like me that are always looking for something new to watch. And lastly, I did want to take a moment to wish each and every one of you guys a happy holiday or a Merry Christmas. I don't know who celebrates it, and a Happy New Year. I did unfortunately get sick. My plan was only to really take a week off after my trip, but for some reason, I always get sick when I take plane rides. I don't know if it's the anxiety. You know, sometimes being a bigger guy, it's like, I don't know, I just don't want to be in planes beside people who don't want to be beside me or anything like that. So sometimes I don't know if that kind of weighs on me a little bit or something, but I always seem to get sick after these plane rides. So I am sorry that it has been such a long time, but we are going to get back on track. Now, the only kind of bright side is that during the Christmas season, they don't always release a ton of movies. Like this week, I think only 2 came out. And I know it's only 5 this week. I could have probably did like a 10 one. But as you can still hear, I am just still a little bit congested and a little bit sick. So I just wanted to make sure that we got back on track, get back into the flow of things. I did put the newest movies in here. There was only 2 this week, and I added a couple more, but I do still intend to catch up, man. I don't want anybody to miss a single movie. And with that, let's get right into the new movies. So the first thing is I'm going to add just a tiny little new section to the beginning of this where we are going to still talk about movies, but these aren't new releases, and these also aren't part of the 5, but I know a lot of people, they do prefer the streaming sites, so any of the kind of newer movies that, especially the VOD ones, if it does come to my attention, I can't always stay up on it, but I will try my best. But if it does come to my attention that movies that were previously on VOD are now going to be available on a streaming service, I am going to add that at the beginning of the video. So the first movie I'm going to cover in that regard is Cuckoo. This one was directed by Tillman Singer. It is a Hunter Schafer movie. It is a 2024 movie, and I just wanted to let you guys know that that movie is available on Hulu. So the next movie I'm going to cover in that regard is the Max and Sam Egger directed The Front Room. This is a Brandy movie. This movie is now available on HBO Max and Prime Video. So the first movie we're going to cover this week is a horror thriller named Deus Irae, and this movie is available on Screambox and VOD Digital. Javier stares at a crucifix, and his expressions and hands suggest that nerves are consuming him. A flashback reveals that a priest devotes his life to visiting families and cleansing their homes from the demons that try to possess them. It is directed by Pedro Cristiani. Okay, so after watching the trailer for Deus Irae, this looks like a pretty good trippy religious horror. Now, the trailer is silent, so it's really kind of hard to ascertain exactly what's going on here, but when I do see the imagery, it does hold all the trappings of a pretty good creepy religious horror. Now, I could see some pretty good creeps and scares being in this movie, especially with some of the imagery and kind of body movement we've seen. Some of that ticky movement, it just kind of creeps me out. Now, when it comes to the gore in the film, it does look like they are trying to kind of give us some pretty good gore. We see imagery like mealworms and maggots, so I'm pretty sure that they are trying to at least give us something kind of shocking here. Now, the story for this one looks interesting, especially with some of the kind of religious imagery we see. It's definitely kind of indicative of what you'd get out of a movie like this, but I did like the fact that they say that they added some Cronenberg type elements to the story, so that gives me something to kind of look forward to. Now, some of the more kind of interesting imagery we saw is we did see a part where like a priest is beating somebody with flaming fists, and there was another part where he was like loading a shotgun, so I really don't know where this story is going to go, but we could get something interesting. Now, unfortunately, I couldn't really get a sense of the performances as the trailer was silent, but it wasn't anything that looked too bad. Now, in the end, Deus Irae looks like a weird kind of possession body horror, but it does look interesting and it's going to get a regular spot on my watch list. Next movie we're going to take a look at is a horror mystery thriller called The Monster Beneath Us, and this movie's available on VOD Digital. Yorkshire, 1898. A grieving woman and her son move back to an unoccupied house of her ex-husband, recently found dead, but they discover that they are not alone in the house. It is directed by Sophie Osborne. Okay, so after watching the trailer for The Monster Beneath Us, this looks like a pretty decent monster horror. Now, when it comes to the creeps and scares, I did see some kind of ominous basement moments that did kind of creep me out, and I also saw some moments where the creature was kind of moving around and the way he was like looking and people were hiding. I just feel like we probably will get a couple of good kind of scares and tension in the film. Now, when it comes to the gore, I didn't exactly see anything over the top, and there's no indication that there's going to be a lot of gore, but it was kind of bloody, and I think that's about all we're probably going to get out of this film. Now, taking place in 1898, obviously this is a period piece, and I did kind of like the set pieces and the production in the film, and none of the acting really looked egregious, so I was kind of okay with it there. Now, when it came to the story in this film, unfortunately, it does look a little bit run-of-the-mill. You know, the whole thing now, I don't know if they're exactly moved into a new house, but a child kind of finding this imaginary friend who then turns out to be some malicious evil who at first, you know, befriends the child, but then eventually tries to get them to do things or becomes evil and tries to take them. It's just a linchpin for so many of the monster stories in the past. Now, The Monster Beneath Us looks alright. I did like some of the imagery. I like the premise about how this monster lives in the basement. That was pretty cool, but I just didn't see anything overly unique as far as story or premise in the film, so I think this one is going to really hinge on execution. And in the end, the film looks alright, and it's going to get a regular spot on my watch list.
I've made another friend. Down in the basement.
Did you find anything down there? I saw something, some creature.
Next movie we're going to take a look at is a comedy horror called The Last Video Store, and this movie's available on VOD Digital. A young woman who is unknowingly in possession of a legendary cursed tape takes a collection of old videotapes to a video store. She and the owner reawaken its curse, which leads to the release of a raft of cinematic villains. It is directed by Cody Kennedy and Tim Rutherford. So after watching the trailer for The Last Video Store, this movie looks like an alright kind of nostalgic throwback to a cursed object horror. Now, the first thing that really stuck out to me in the trailer of this one was I really like this kind of 80s nostalgic feel that we got, even down to the video stores. Just something that I've experienced. It had the synth music. It has the, neon. It just has a really good nostalgic throwback feel. Now, when it comes to the gore in the film, I do think that this one's going to be a little bit of a shining point for the Gorehounds, as we did see a ton of creative kills and a lot of good practical gore. From just a bunch of bloody scenes to obvious beheadings to visceral faces being ripped off, it just kind of got me excited in that respect. Now, another element I didn't mind that I saw in the trailer was the character work. Now, when it came to the dialogue and some of the jokes, I really did think they were pretty chuckle-worthy, and I thought that it just had a good tongue-in-cheek style humor that had a good level of meta to it. The next thing that kind of impressed me about this film was I did like the premise of it, kind of a cursed object videotape, and then when they play it or whatever happens, it just brings on a slew of these kind of iconic from their world horror villains. It'd be like, you know, finding a cursed tape and then having like Jason and Freddy and it all coming out. So in that respect, the movie with the gore, it just looks fun and violent. Now, one thing that did kind of make me worry about the trailer is that some of the parts, it really did kind of traverse down that vein of being just super zany. But again, since it's such kind of an 80s throwback film, I just hope that they keep the zaniness in that 80s kind of fashion. The Last Video Store actually looks like a pretty decent watch, and with how much gore it has in it, I think this one's going to get a regular to just a little bit of a higher spot on my watch list.
Do you know what movie this is?
Legend has it, the dreaded video nomicon, haunting those who watch it. It's been lost for decades. This is that same cursed tape.
Should we check it out?
Next movie we're going to take a look at is a crime horror thriller called The Soul Eater, and this movie is available on VOD Digital. When violent and gruesome deaths start plaguing a small mountain village, an old legend about a malevolent creature resurfaces. It is directed by Alexandre Bastillo and Julian Maury. So after watching the trailer for The Soul Eater, this one looks like a pretty good, albeit run-of-the-mill crime horror. Now, when it came to the creeps and scares of this film, I didn't really see many in the way of like traditional creeps and scares, but I do think that we're going to get a movie that's kind of along the same lines as Long Legs or Seven. So I do think that we could get a jump scare or two, and we're also going to probably get a lot of like tense situations. Now, when it comes to these crime horrors, I do like them to kind of break through the thriller vibe. I did get that with a movie like Seven or Long Legs, where they just make the crimes a little bit more heinous and disturbing, kind of just to embody that horror element. And the way that the killer kind of acts and the things that he's doing, and even how he's dressed up in the trailer, this film could embody that. Now, I didn't exactly see much in the trailer as far as gore, but sometimes a film like this can really surprise you with that. Now, depending on the number of victims and how they really build the story, we could get some gruesome kind of crime scene footage. We could get some gruesome flashbacks. They could have some really gruesome victims. So there is always the potential for that. Now, the acting and the production in this one seemed pretty good. Now, again, the story for this one is a little bit run-of-the-mill, especially as kind of serial killer crime horrors go. But the fact that the story and the creature or the killer is kind of rooted in this legend makes me think that there could be an interesting angle to this one. Now, I'm not going as far as to say that because it's something from legend that it's going to necessarily have a supernatural note, but we could get something like that. The Soul Eater looks like it could be a good, tense, atmospheric crime horror, and it's going to get a regular spot on my watch list.
Never invite him in. He will invade your home.
Anyone warn you about the carnage in there?
The Soul Eater.
All these children vanished from neighboring towns.
When did they go missing?
6 months ago.
Last movie we're going to look at this week is a horror thriller called Heretic, and this movie is available on VOD Digital. Two young religious women are drawn into a game of cat and mouse in the house of a strange man. It is directed by Scott Beck and Brian Woods. So before we get into the trailer for Heretic, I just have to give a full caveat that I have seen this movie, and Heretic is a pretty decent to good horror thriller. Now, when it comes to the creeps and scares in the film, you do get some pretty good tense moments out of it, and you do get some good jump scares, but it's just very light on the creeps. Also, aside from a few choice moments in the film, you're not really getting a bunch of gore, but it does have a couple of little gory elements, and you can just tell it's definitely not a focal point of the film. Now, personally, I found that the characters and the production in this film were top-notch, and it just had great production and good set pieces. Now, when it came to the story, I mean, it wasn't 100% unique, but it was unique enough, and I did like the kind of little angle it had going for it, and I did like the path it followed. Also, as someone who does like kind of that whole religious, theist versus atheist kind of debate sphere, I did find that this movie had some really good philosophical kind of debate in it. And if you are into that kind of material, I think you're going to like the dialogue and the back and forth that the characters have. Now, I wouldn't go as far as to say that the movie is drama, because I didn't really find that through the character interactions that we've really had much growth to the characters, but I really did think the dialogue was just good and witty, and the back and forth really ensued in this interesting kind of battle of the wits. I also like kind of the direction and where the story went throughout this movie, and I found that it had some good revelations and some good aha moments that just kept you invested. Personally, I thought Heretic was a really good film, and I would give it a regular, maybe even a little bit higher than regular spot on your watch list.
We just need to go home.
I won't keep you if you wish to leave. But I want you to choose which door to go through based on your faith.
What does this have to do with us leaving?
Everything.
Well, guys, that's going to do it for this back from hiatus new movie list. And if you did find a couple of gems for your watch list, please leave me a like and subscribe. Now, if I had to make a couple of picks this week, the first movie I'd probably pick, even though it is a horror comedy, and I know I'm always like, I don't like horror comedies, but I do think that The Last Video Store, it just looks kind of interesting. I did like the story and premise. I did like the production of it. I thought it had a lot of blood and gore, which I haven't really seen a good gory movie in a little while. So I could go for some tear off face type of material. So that's going to be my first pick of the week. And my second pick of the week is going to be a movie that I've seen before, but if you haven't seen it, you really should give Heretic a try. Again, I did think it was a good kind of, I wouldn't exactly say a twist and turn story, but again, just certain parts of the story, it really had those good aha moments, and I did like the interaction between the characters, and I do always like these kind of philosophical debates, which I just found it had interesting perspectives, it actually was a good theistic kind of debate that they had on screen there. So I thought that was a good interaction, and if you do like kind of a smarter dialogue in movies, I do think that this is one for you to watch. Well, guys, I'm going to get out of here for real this time, as I have got a ton of movies to watch. If you made it this far into the video, I do want to thank you and I appreciate you. And I just wanted to give another happy holiday and happy new year to everyone out there who has followed the channel, supported me. I've got a lot of goals for the channel, kind of improvements, work on the set, work on as much as I can, and just kind of keep going, you know what I mean? And keep bringing a good community together of people who do like horror movies just like me. Now, even though I was sick, I definitely want to give a thanks to my girlfriend's parents. They did airlift us some Christmas plates, so I did get to have my beloved Christmas dinner because I just love stuffing. I love turkey with gravy and all that stuff. I like sweet potatoes with marshmallows, just that good meal. I did still get to have it even though I was sick, so I want to thank them. And I hope you guys have been okay and taking care of yourselves, and I will see you guys in the next one. Peace.
We just experienced the power of cinema.